So yesterday, following the conclusion of the 2025 NBA draft, we went back and looked and picked out our top five winners of the NBA draft this year. And so today, it was only right to go back in time once again and pick out all of the losers in this year's NBA draft. Of course, no team is perfect whatsoever, and there were definitely a couple of teams this year that made questionable decisions, in my opinion, and some teams that really messed up with some big time opportunities. But before we get into it, please feel free to go down below, subscribe, leave a like, comment, and share with your friends, as well as turn on those post notifications. And as always, go down below to the description where all of our ads for all of our social medias will be: TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. Where on all those social medias, you will get to see my reaction to breaking news from the NBA and the NFL, and you will never miss for when the podcast uploads. Without further ado, guys, let's not waste any more time. Let's get into my losers for the 2025 NBA draft, and we start all the way first in Toronto, Canada, with the Toronto Raptors at number 9 overall, taking Colin Murray Boyles out of South Carolina. Now, this is not to say that I have any real problems with Colin Murray Boyles as a player. Really solid box power forward. Could be a potential double monster, right? With 10 plus points, 10 rebounds. Also was a guy that averaged over a block and a steal, so he is formidable on the defensive end. However, as you know me throughout these drafts, I look more towards the fit. How does this player fit into this specific team's lineup? And to me, CMB just doesn't have really a clear place in Toronto. I was potentially looking at them picking one of the top two centers in this draft, Kaman Malawak or Derek Queen, because a big was certainly of need. But you pick a guy now in CMB who stands at 6'7", is quite small for the area that he plays at that power forward position, right? And I just don't know how you are going to be able to orchestrate this starting lineup. You're obviously going to have Quickly, Barrett, Brandon Ingram, and Scotty Barnes within that starting five. But then what happens after that? Are you going to have CMB start at your center position? Are you going to have your number 9 overall pick coming off of the bench? Are you going, if he does end up starting, are you going to want to go out and play a Mike D'Antoni, Houston Rockets type style offense where you're scoring majority off of the break, having high scoring affairs, and just banking on your center position being 6'8" and shorter? I mean, potentially you could do that, but have we seen that type of style of play really rise to the occasion and take you to an NBA championship? No, by no means that we haven't. And when you add into the fact that there are a couple of people that are questioning CMB and his play style and his ability to really translate to the NBA today, right? Because he does lack that three-point shot, because he's not really much of a rim runner, as is maybe like a guy like Austin Newell coming out of Georgia. People are wondering if that old day, box power forward type play style can translate to this modern day type of play style within the NBA. So questionable decision here, just simply based off the fit, and you're wondering if the guy really can translate to this highest level. And you're also wondering if he could be there after we saw a couple of derogatory terms be tossed around after he was drafted to Toronto. Then we move forward to the Portland Trailblazers, to the Northwest Pacific of the United States, where they once again took another huge surprise in drafting Hansen Yang, center out of China at number 16 overall. Of course, they did own number 11 overall, and they did a pick swap with the Memphis Grizzlies, who ended up taking Cedric Coward at number 11 overall. And to say that this was the biggest surprise of the draft would also be a big time understatement, because nobody, and I mean nobody, outside of the Blazers organization expected this pick to go through. Hansen Young was viewed as a mid to late second round pick. I even saw some mock drafts that it didn't even have him drafted at all. And yet he gets picked within the top 20. Not even that. He gets picked one pick outside of the top 15. In my opinion, not to hate on Hansen Young as a player, if you actually watch his tape, he's actually pretty smooth with the basketball, right? It actually reminds me a lot, and I've heard a lot of these comparisons within the past couple of hours, as kind of that Chinese Nikola Jokic, right? Really solid ball handler, has a lot of offensive creativity off the block with his post moves and whatnot. But it just comes down to the value, right? They could have easily gotten, one of the top 15 players. They could have gotten Cedric Coward on their squad. He definitely would have plugged in very well at that shooting guard position now that they traded away Anthony Simons. Could they have gotten, one of the remaining centers potentially if they did want another center like a Derek Queen who has some offensive creativeness as well? You could have gotten maybe somebody like a Noah Senge who was a, big time eye for them. And then you could have gone out and you could have traded into even the early second round if you wanted to, and not give up those much assets, and went out and got Hansen Young there. And when you put into the perspective that as of right now, Portland has 3 centers on their roster in Donovan Clingan and Robert Williams and DeAndre Ayton. Of course, the latter two maybe not more on their long-term plans, but you do have a second-year rookie center in Donovan Clingan. There's even more question marks. And to take it even one more step further, a couple of days ago, they just traded their top young star guard in Anthony Simons to the Boston Celtics for a 35-year-old Drew Holiday, a big-time veteran. So the fit doesn't make sense, the value doesn't make sense, and now the timeline isn't making sense. So no disrespect to Hansen Young, and I hope that he does well in the NBA. And I'm actually really, really excited to see what he can do early on in the summer league, and to see if Portland saw something that nobody else saw, and if he can prove us wrong. But it was just too big of a reach and too big of a surprise here to be able to go with him number 16 overall. Again, I hope he works out. Maybe the Blazers could potentially find a way to get him involved playing more at the power forward position. But even his athleticism, I'd be more comfortable with Donovan Clingan's athleticism at power forward and then playing Hansen Young at the center. So overall, just a big time reach for me. But I wish the guy all the best, and I really, really hope that he can prove his talent, because he is a really creative offensive player, and maybe he could get something going. And maybe that is what Portland needed. They just felt so stuck that they wanted to go out, just get that X factor type player, and just say screw it and gamble and see if it pays off. And let me tell you, if this does pay off, it will be seen as probably one of the biggest NBA steals, one of the biggest NBA surprises of all time. Then we move even further back into the draft at number 24 overall with the Orlando Magic, who took Jace Richardson with the number 24 overall pick. And then in the second round, they went ahead and traded for Noah Penda with the number 32 overall. Now, this isn't a bad draft whatsoever. So you might say, Diego, why the heck are you putting this as a loser? Because I don't hate this draft. Jace Richardson was one of the best three-point shooters within this draft class this year. And Noah Penda, while he does have a lot of offensive concerns, he is lengthy, he is tall, he has a lot of really solid athleticism, and he's able to force his way into passing lanes and whatnot to create turnovers. So I definitely don't mind the talent that they got. But once again, it comes down to the fit. The number one need that I had for the Orlando Magic this year was a floor general point guard. Scratch that. I've had that as the biggest need for the Orlando Magic for like the past 2 or 3 years. They need a distribution type guard, and they didn't get that. Jace Richardson is more of an undersized shooting guard. He is going to be primarily used to score, and they still have a big-time hole on a distributor to get the ball to their scorers. Jalen Suggs isn't going to play that role, right? Anthony Black, maybe, but that's not the role that he's played so far, and he hasn't really been developing over the past couple of years, especially with his shooting game and being so predictable on offense. So, the players that they got weren't bad, but I definitely do not like the big time hole that you have, especially because they have so much scoring now. Take Jace Richardson out of the picture. They have Desmond Bane. They have Franz Wagner. They have Paulo Banchero. They have Jalen Suggs, who can score as well. They have enough scoring. Get yourself a ball handler that's going to be able to limit turnovers, right? To work in the pick and roll with your bigs and with your forwards in the pick and pop, and be able to get them the ball cleanly. A point guard that's going to be able to drive to the basket and get there. Even somebody like a Ben Surratt, from Israel. They had that draft pick before the Brooklyn Nets, who we'll get to in a little bit. Even a point guard like that, who could be a good distribution guy from Europe, that would have been a much more solid fit. So I don't hate the players that Orlando went and got, and I think it was actually pretty solid value for Noah Penda at number 32. But they have failed to address year after year the biggest need on their team, and in my opinion, the biggest piece of their team that is holding them back. Then we go to the Minnesota Timberwolves at number 17 and number 45, respectively, who also just took a really weird take to their draft. I really wanted to see Minnesota to go out and improve their offense, right? They need to take pressure off of Anthony Edwards' shoulders. They need to get the ball out of his hands at some moments in time. And because of that, they needed shooting, and they had every opportunity in the world to go out and improve that at both of these spots. Guys like Nick Clifford and Liam McNeely were available within that first round to go out and get, and they just simply passed on all of them. And instead of that, they go out and get Johan Berenger and Rocco Zikarsky two big time front court players. Zakarski is 7'3" inches tall. Behringer, I believe, sits at about 6'10", 6'11", nearly 7 feet as well. They got primarily two front court guys. And when you put that into the perspective that they already have three-star front court guys with Julius Randle, Rudy Gobert, Naz Reid, and I understand that there are some doubts about some of those players, Naz Reid resigning and potentially being around. There's been talks about them getting rid of Rudy Gobert because some of his limitations on both sides of the ball. And of course, Julius Randle is getting older. He's pretty expensive, but he actually helped them out a really good deal in that playoff run. So I understand that they're potentially looking for cheaper options to get rid of those guys, but it just doesn't help you right now. And the big key to this is Minnesota is a playoff contending team. They need talent right now. A talent like Nick Clifford, who was a 4-year senior out of Colorado and Colorado State, and who was good everywhere, really didn't have a big-time weakness. Those are the type of players that you would like to look for when you are a contending team. Not two front court bigs that are going to be the fourth and fifth big men on your roster, who are two big-time developmental prospects. Sure, Zakarski has a lot of potential as a rim protector at 7'3", and he has some solid athleticism and whatnot. And Behringer, even with his size and length, playing within the pick and roll and getting in that with some of the guards that they got last year, like Rob Dillingham, Terrence Shannon, and of course Ant as always. But I'm not even sure if these guys are really going to be able to play right away. So it was a head scratcher. It was more of a depth move. It was more of a ceiling move, to potentially get some high potential guys. But once again, similar to the Portland Trailblazers pick, I just feel like that they left value on the board and they really didn't make themselves better within the short term. And when you're a team that just made the conference finals, you need to make yourself better. Minnesota definitely did not accomplish that in this draft. Then we moved to a historic night for a team, and that was the Brooklyn Nets, who had a historic 5 first-round picks. Yes, that is 5 first-round picks for the 2025 NBA draft. And I wish that I could say that they hit on at least majority of their draft picks. I wish I could say that they went, at least 4 for 5, 3 for 5. But I have to say, I think that they might have went 1 for 5, if not 0 for 5. My favorite pick out of this whole draft for the Brooklyn Nets was 100% Drake Powell at number 2 out of North Carolina. I really like him as a 3-and-D player. He does a really great job of being able to stretch the floor and can guard, the best forward on the other side of the court. But everything else that they did for their draft was just wildly confusing, especially the most confusing part, drafting 3 European point guards in the first round: Igor Demin, Nolan Traore, and Ben Seraph. So let's start from the top, right? Igor Demin, not a bad player, right? I actually had him still going within the lottery at number 13 overall to the Atlanta Hawks, and there were many people that had him going just outside of the lottery at about 15, 16, or 17, around that range. They got him within the top 10. So it's a little bit of a reach for me. They do get a 6'9" facilitator that's going to be able to go through, play the 1, play the 2, play the 3, right? He's going to be able to play all around the court. And he's not really going to be in a big-time defensive mismatch because of that size that he has. But for me, it was just the value. Then you get to number 19 with Nolan Traore, who I actually think was one of the best value that they got within this draft. I had him as like a top 15, top 14 type prospect. They end up getting him at 19. But I think that he's just too similar to Igor, and I don't know how these two play together well because neither of them really have an enticing three-point shot. We already discussed Drake Powell, but then you get Ben Seraph at number 26. Now, he's interesting because he probably has the best three-point shot out of the 3 of these guys. So if he's able to be, he is probably the most versatile to be able to play next to one of either Traore or Demon. But are these 3 going to be able to play together, or who's going to be coming off the bench? How is this lineup really going to work? It's just so confusing. You just got, I believe, too many offensive playmakers, too many ball handlers, because make no mistake about it, all 3 of these guys are going to need the ball within their hands to be successful. Whether they're passing the ball or whether they're attacking the basket and scoring, because those are the 2 things that they do best on offense, they are going to need the ball in their hands to do it. And there's just not enough time for the ball to be in each one of these guys' hands for them to be truly successful. And then number 27 with Danny Wolf. Again, I don't hate this pick, and I actually think that this is also pretty great value. I had Wolf going within the top 20. I know that there were a couple of people that had him falling back a little bit, so he falls a little bit. But again, he needs the ball in his hands. He is a point forward type big man. At 6'11", nearly 7 feet tall, he was the main driving point guard for the Michigan Wolverines in what was a 7-foot pick and roll duo. that was the role that he played. He distributed the basketball and he drove to the basket. And so I just don't know, with the four guys that you have right here, how you are realistically going to be able to get all these guys the ball for them to be successful. Not to mention that you still have Cam Thomas, who they're potentially looking to re-sign, Nick Claxton, and Cam Johnson. So it's just a weird lineup, and it definitely has to be something that we don't realize about the potential play style that they're trying to play. I don't know if they're going to be passing it for the first 28 seconds of the possession and then just chunk up a shot, and that's going to work. I don't even know if all of these guys are going to be coming to America right away, right? There was talks about Ben Surratt potentially staying a year or two within Israel. Is he going to do that? We'll have to see. But by all means, it was just a really, really interesting draft strategy in what was a big time historic night for the Brooklyn Nets. And I just think that they could have done so much better, gotten so much better talent, and just so much better fits. And they just went such an interesting route with their 5 first-round picks. Then you got the New Orleans Pelicans, who, on the surface actually had a pretty good night, right? You got some really, really great talented players in Jeremiah Fears and Derek Queen, both guys that I had going inside the lottery. And you got Derek Queen technically at number 23 overall with the trade that they made with the Atlanta Hawks. But that was just the problem with the New Orleans Pelicans, was the trade that they made. They gave up a 2026 unprotected first-round pick, next year's unprotected first-round pick. And, again, it's just another big-time gamble. Now, who knows? Can that gamble pay off? Could New Orleans potentially be a top 8 team within the West next year? Definitely. It's definitely possible. But with the players that they have, could they definitely be a bottom 3 team as well? That is definitely possible as well. Zion Williamson is almost bound to get injured almost every single season, right? DeJounte Murray got injured last season. Jeremiah Fears and Derek Queen, while they are both talented and both very crafty on the offensive end, they struggle defensively, and they also struggle from the three-point line. Herb Jones and Trey Murphy, two solid players, but both players who have been in consistent trade talks over the past couple of seasons, right? So there's just too much uncertainty here for you to be able to give up a big-time draft pick like that. Because if you fail, right, if the season doesn't go to plan and you're in the bottom half of the West, which is possible with how stacked the West is, and you have some solid odds, that's a potential number 1 overall pick right there. If things go south, they could potentially be giving up the number 1 overall pick. Now, don't get me wrong, they could also potentially be giving up the number 18 overall pick, right? The number 25 overall pick. But there's just too much room for error here with such a young team, with so many guys that are coming off of injury, with potentially this not even being the final roster, with Herb Jones and Trey Murphy potentially being traded. You can't give up and gamble that big of an asset for two guys that have big time glaring holes. As much as I love both of these prospects, and give up that big time of an asset, it just did not make any sense when you could have perfectly stood back, at number 23, probably kept Austin Newell, who would have been, solid, especially on the defensive end, and then pick Jeremiah Fears at 7, and then just keep your draft pick from next year. That is just a much more stabilizing type draft. This one is a big risk. I hope it does pay off for them, and I hope that both of these guys do well in the league, because they are both two of my favorite NBA prospects in this draft. But there's no question about it, Fears needs to improve from the three-point line and defensively, as does Derek Queen. And then I believe that this is my final team. Yes, it is my final team, and that is the Utah Jazz, picking Ace Bailey at number 5 and then Walter Clayton at number 18. And I have this team here for 2 reasons, right? Number 1, obviously, is the fit, right? You did get two of the biggest shot makers within college basketball this year, right? You did get two of the most talented guys within college basketball this year. No questions about it. But I just don't know what Utah's plan really is. And from what I've heard, it doesn't really seem like they have a plan. It kind of just seemed like Danny Ainge is trying to throw together some of the most talented players that he can and just throw them together and hope that they work. Because with Walter Clayton being drafted, you now have 4 point guards. You have him, you have Colin Sexton, you have Keontae George, and you have Isaiah Collier. All 4 who are going to warrant playing time. With Ace Bailey on the roster, you have him, you have Taylor Hendricks, you have John Collins, you have Lauri Markkanen. You have all of those guys within their front court, not even to mention Walker Kessler at the center position, not even to mention Cody Williams within that lineup as well, right? So I just don't know what the direction really is. And of course, the second reason, we cannot, bring up the Utah Jazz without bringing up this, and that is the fact of if Ace Bailey is even going to be playing for the Utah Jazz. He has not reported to Utah yet. There's been reports that he has had very, very, very little communication with the franchise itself. Is he going to sit out? Is he going to demand to be traded somewhere else? And if he does, how much value can you really get for this guy who has a big time ego and attitude? There's not many teams that are really going to want that. So there's questions about the direction. There's questions about the multitude of players that you have. Don't get me wrong, depth is fine, but when you have four starting caliber point guards, that is obviously a big time issue. And especially when you have your top five, number 5 overall pick, saying that he didn't even want to go to Utah and potentially not even playing for you, that's an issue as well. So the value was fine, especially Ace at 5 was definitely a good drop for the Jazz, but too much depth, not enough direction, and your best guy might not even want to be playing for your franchise. And that's kind of all I have for you guys today. Those were I believe it was 7 losers of this draft. Let me know what you guys think about that. What did I get right? What did I get wrong? Who are your biggest losers of the draft? Who were your biggest winners of the draft? What was the most surprising pick? Was there a predictable pick in line? Which one of these NBA losing teams do you believe, their draft strategy will actually end up paying off? If I'll have to say out of any of these, possibly the Pelicans, right? Because I think that they got the most talent. Maybe the Raptors if they can work in the right strategy. And then, of course, I'm going to be rooting for Young Hassan. I really want that guy to pan out with how much pressure that he has on his shoulders right now with being such a huge reach. So those are the 3 teams that I have in mind potentially. And then, of course, the Orlando Magic could be successful with just how much bare talent that they have. But let me know all of that down below, as well as going down below, subscribing, leaving more comments, leaving a like, and sharing with your friends, and also going into that description, checking out all of our ads to all of our social medias, TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. We're on all those social medias. You'll get to see my reaction to the latest breaking news in the NBA and NFL, and you will never miss for when the podcast uploads. So much more content rolling out throughout the summer, guys, and I am super excited. And without further ado, that's all that I have for you guys today. I will see you guys on the next one. Have a good one. Take it easy. Peace.